So, hi everyone. It's nice to have so many of you joining us today. We are ProQuo AI, and we are presenting our first event series called What the Fac. We've got loads of people. I can see they're still climbing. They're piling into Zoom, which is awesome. Why don't we go ahead and get started? All right, Saoirse, are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be, Michael.
Wonderful. So welcome everyone to What the Fac, how to build a brand people fall in love with, which is quite a fitting theme for February, given Valentine's Day is coming soon. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm Michael. I am the head of marketing at ProQuo, and my background is in brand development and brand building. Before ProQuo AI, I worked at Unilever across their US, their UK, and their Australian businesses. I spent about 10 years there, and during that time, I developed a really kind of strong passion for understanding people and how they relate to brands and how they develop and deepen their relationship with brands. And I'm joined today with Saoirse Sadek, who is our head of growth at ProQuo. Saoirse, do you want to give a bit of an intro about yourself?
Most certainly. So I come from an advertising and communications background. So I've worked in growing brands through the way they speak, the way they present themselves, what they stand for, and basically articulating the best way for them to communicate with the world around them. So I've always been a strategist. I have worked in, I don't know how many categories now, it must be 100. That's everything from sort of food and bev, alcohol, hair care, banking, telecoms, and even for a brief stint, launching an area of London, which was actually a very exciting project. So anyway, I'm here to sort of talk through the component parts of a relationship and why they're important and what kind of things you should be asking yourself or thinking about as you examine your own brands.
Thanks, Saoirse. And we said this up front, but this is going to be a really interactive session. So thank you to Ben and Georgina already for being the brave first two that have come off mute and said hello to us. So during this session, feel free to do the same. At times, we're going to ask for a bit of participation. We really want to make this a session where we all learn together. We also have a feature where you can raise your hand if you want to talk to us or just drop something in the chat. We're very, very, very happy to go off course and make this what you want to make of it. Today, we're going to be talking all about how to build kind of brands that people fall in love with. And the subject matter of today is part of a broader series at ProQuo, which we're calling What the Fac. And What the Fac aims to answer the most frequently asked questions in brand management. So we'll be talking about how to build a brand people fall in love with today, but in the future, there'll be talks on how do I get my product into more stores? How do I build a compelling trade story? What's the best way to launch a new product into market and exploring new product development? And even things like how do I build my brand's growth strategy? So it's answering kind of those commonly asked questions in brand management. And while we've got a lot of familiar kind of names and kind of blank faces, I guess, on the call with just the names and not a lot of video, but we've got loads of familiar people here joining us today. I thought I might just introduce really quickly what ProQuo is all about. We're a brand management platform, a technology which has been designed for brand managers, specifically within challenger brands. And what our platform does is it helps provide brand managers with the assurance that the decisions that they're making each and every day are going to be the most impactful for their brand. And we do that by serving brand managers on our platform with customized action plans for their brand, literally the guidance that a brand manager would need to take in order to grow their brand across all the different levers of marketing. So why don't we try and get you guys off mute and start with a bit of interaction. Feel free to drop in the chat or just shout out any brands that you love, any brands that you love to hate, what comes to your mind when we ask about brands that you feel really connected to, with a really strong relationship with? Feel free to shout them out.
If it helps, Michael, my first one is Goop. Does anyone else know Goop? It's Gwyneth Paltrow's like lifestyle brand, and I'm obsessed with it, and I hate everything it is, I think. So I think I just love to hate it. I'm having a really weird relationship with it. Some others that are coming up in the chat, Finisterre. Interesting. Is that, yeah, Finisterre is a love one.
What about it? What about it do you love? Don't be shy on the microphone.
I'll go back to Lucy. Love their storytelling.
Storytelling, cool.
That's very true. And there's a simplicity to their brand, right? It's very design led. Very nice. Patagonia, Converse. Thank you, Holly. You agree on Goop. Did you watch the Netflix show? I watched it. It was terrible. And I watched the whole thing, the whole season. Lush, Dr. Bronner's. Interesting. These are good brands.
Dr. Bronner's is good. Lush is good too. Okay, so that's got our minds flowing around brands. That's important for today. But let's get into it. So we're going to break the session down into 4 parts. We'll start by talking about relationships, what they are and why they're important. Then we'll investigate the science that is behind relationships. We'll discuss kind of how people make decisions within that section, and what parts of the brain, with what feelings and thoughts are decisions made. We'll then talk about kind of how a relationship is composed. What are the key elements that make up the brand relationship that's exchanged between people and brands that people love. And then we'll finish by talking about how you, as a brand manager, could help build your brand's relationship with people. So let's do it. Search, I'm going to pass it over to you to take the first section on why relationships are important.
You fling that mic over, no problem.
Grab it.
So, I mean, I feel like we could do a deck 800 slides long on why our relationship's important in the broadest sense. And it's like one of life's fundamental questions. But in its simplest meaning, a relationship is the way in which 2 or more concepts, objects, or people are connected. I think that one's fairly self-explanatory. What becomes interesting then is when you overlay that on what that means for brands. And if we go on to the next slide there, please, Bridget. Why is a relationship important to brands? When you guys go into the supermarket, I don't know about you, but I kind of walk up to for example, the toothpaste aisle, and there's like 50 types of toothpaste that sit in there. I'm talking like a big Sainsbury's or Tesco's here. So there's lots of toothpaste in there. And yet I still know which one I pick up. I still know which one I'm going to go for, but they all do the same thing. They all will clean plaque. They'll all taste like mint. You know, they'll all clean your teeth. They'll all do the same kind of job. So why do I know which one I care about? Why do I know which one I'll pick up? And I think that's the context that we have to view brands in today. We're living in a time of competitive convergence, and the actual tangible difference between most brands is often actually negligible. So unless you're creating a new category or truly disrupting a category, we have to find ways for brands to become that one that people pick up, that brand of choice. And the way you do that is by understanding what it is that people want to interact with your brand about. What would make them inclined to engage with you. And the secret to that really is understanding your relationship. What is it about you that pulls people in? What is it about you that pushes people to have a relationship with you? So being able to, first of all, understand it and then optimize it, fix where you're vulnerable, to amplify that relationship and make sure that more and more people want to have one with your brand. So kind of deconstructing that, by the way, if you guys have any questions as we go, dump them in the chat or shout out. The science behind these relationships then, it's twofold. If we go on to the next one, please, Bridget. Essentially, people weigh up the negatives and the positives. What is the cost versus the benefit of being in this relationship? That's what's called the theory of social exchange. As long as people are getting more, feel like they're getting more from a relationship than they're getting out of it, they're willing to stay in that relationship. It's as soon as that the scales become unbalanced and they feel like they're giving more than they're getting, that's when they almost always choose to exit that relationship. So as long as the exchange is in favor of the consumer, that relationship deepens, they love you longer, they love you more intensely, and they stick with you more loyally over time. And to be honest, if we go on to the next one, that's true for any relationship in the world. If you guys think about your friendships or your like romantic relationships or your familial relationships, if over time you take a look back and the costs outweigh the benefits, you tend to seriously consider that relationship and tend to exit it, to be honest. Obviously, if it's your mum, that's a slightly harder one than if it's just an acquaintance, but we all have choices to make. And so successful relationships are all about that positive quid pro quo, which is, funnily enough, where we got our brand name from, Pro Quo AI. So what makes up a relationship? There are really two major components of what forms a relationship. So the first is your sort of subconscious responses, and the second is your conscious ones. And I'm sure that most of you on the call are familiar with the concepts of system 1 and system 2, but they're really your feelings and your thoughts. So how do you subconsciously feel about someone, and how do you consciously think about them? What's kind of interesting in this way of looking at relationships, 95% of your decisions are made subconsciously. So almost everything you do, you've kind of already decided on, and you're just going to do it. And your system 2, your conscious thinking, becomes a way to rationalize that decision or fight it or whatever. Your system 2 actually only makes about 5% of your decisions, and they're kind of big, hairy, complicated ones. They're not, the simple, should I pick this up in the supermarket kind of questions. So your system 1 is very fast, it's very automatic, very intuitive. It's your gut feel, and it's how we manage to navigate life so efficiently. Your system 2 is your slower, more deliberate, much more sort of rule governed and prone to bias as a system of thinking. What becomes interesting then when you're using this to look at brands is you can start to understand, do people's system 1 reaction actually align with their system 2 reaction? So in their gut, do they actually care about me at all? Are they interested? And when they think about me, is that also the case? Because it can be that people feel really positively about your brand, but there's some thoughts that kind of prove barriers to entry, for example. The example that I always use here is a chocolate bar. So, and I'm not on board with diet culture before we go into this. I want to make that really clear. But say you show a chocolate bar to someone on a diet. That person, their system 1 is delicious, yum, love it, chocolate's the best. Their system 2 is full of sugar, not very good for me, I don't actually want it. And you're kind of telling yourself, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't need it. That's a really interesting conflict for a brand manager to know. That's obviously a not particularly nuanced one, that's an obvious one, but the conflict of those two things then allows the marketer to be really clear about what's actually stopping people from picking up that bar. Or if they're picking up the bar and feeling really negative about the brand whilst doing so, that's not a positive thing for the brand. Great for sales, bad for the brand over time. So navigating the similarities and differences of system 1 and system 2 is really critical in understanding how we form relationships. If everyone would be up for it, I think we should play a little game on Uber, because I think it demonstrates how important it is to understand how people feel about brands. Shall we give it a go? Would everyone mind coming off mute? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 16 questions. And if you guys could answer them with either yes or no, and answer as quickly as you can, then we're gonna get the ball rolling. So answer all of the questions about Uber. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent ball game playing, guys. Thank you. Not leaving me hanging. So, thinking about Uber, answering as quickly as possible, yes or no. Is Uber attractive?
Yes.
Yes.
Is Uber aspirational?
No.
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 Does Uber do the right thing?
No.
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 Does Uber understand you?
Yes.
Yes.
Does Uber relate to you?
No.
No.
Does Uber behave openly?
No.
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 Is Uber forward thinking?
Yes.
Yes.
Is Uber popular?
Yes.
Yes.
Does Uber do its job well?
Yes.
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 Does Uber have a clear purpose?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Is Uber
No.
unique?
Is it what?
Unique.
No.
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 Oh.
Not anymore.
Someone's going away from the yes/no structure there, but I do think. Is Uber relevant to you?
Yes.
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 Only a couple more now. Is Uber worth its price?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it consistent?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it familiar?
Yes.
Yes.
Final one, is it easy to use?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thanks very much, guys, for playing the Uber game. I appreciate it. Here is obviously not a live version. We're working from a PowerPoint deck here. We're not magic. But this is the response that we tend to get from this game. So you can see that how people feel about Uber is really positive in most ways and incredibly negative in some very specific ways. So what's interesting here is that Uber is very strong rationally. So in terms of how clear they are in what they offer you, how relevant it is to you, how consistent, how easy to use, good value for money, all of that, like full marks, it does really well. Where it has a spectacular problem is in emotional persuasion. So these 8 up here are emotional. You can see that people really don't like the way that Uber behaves emotionally. They think it's really, really unacceptable. And that's because it doesn't behave in the right way. It's not transparent about what it does. And so people can barely connect to the brand. How can you connect to a brand which, you know, you think behaves criminally almost? And this is a result of all of their workplace harassment, bullying, sexual abuse, dangerous trips, all of that kind of stuff. All of their PR disaster is contributing to this being a really, really vulnerable spot for Uber. However, if you look at what taxi cabs looked like before Uber ever existed, all of these rational ones down here were really bad, as was empathy. Because you couldn't get a cab when you wanted one. You know, this is the same in the UK as it is in the US. You couldn't get one when you wanted one, so it was really hard to use. It was inconsistent. Your experience was often quite strange. It was impossible to get one because it cost an arm and a leg to get one from here to, you know, the end of the road. And so it became irrelevant for people, and it didn't perform particularly well. So what Uber did that was incredibly disruptive was actually they came in and they understood their target better than anybody else did. They were incredibly empathetic. They understood it's not just about making it easy to pay or hailing a cab to your house, which is what the other traditional taxi companies were working on at the time, sort of very specific solutions to rational problems. Uber took a step back and it said, it's all of those things. We're not helping people to get from A to B, which is the only point of a taxi. So that's how they got to make payment seamless, make the journey easy, make it available to wherever you are. They did an overhaul of everything, you know, make it a technology company, make it all accessible through your mobile. So it really was a real feat of disruption, but it was because they were able to understand what people expected from the category and how what they expected could be disrupted in a hugely positive way. Michael, do you have anything you wanted to add on that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, have you seen the recent campaign that they're running around offering discounts? I think in the UK it's £15 discount to vaccination centers. So you can tell that they've kind of recognized that their relationship with people is kind of suffering in that top right quadrant, you know, the integrity and the transparency behind their brand. And they've really tried to dial that up to strengthen their overall relationship with people. It's something like at ProQuo that we've actually looked at. We've got something called Creative Lab that you can optimize ideas within. You can understand kind of what people are feeling around kind of a concept or a new product launch or a communication, and the potential that it has to strengthen your brand's relationship. And for that ad for Uber in particularly, it performed really well against those red drivers, which for them would be a really good signal that their relationship strength would increase.
Well, exactly, because their problems are in integrity, transparency, and connection, and something like free rides for NHS workers, which I also think they were doing. If you were to put it through Creative Lab, you would see that the exact point at which it improved, you know, it would really strategically move the brand forward. Because I did see them do some work last year which didn't target those three, and it targeted like the ease of use. And it's a bit like, you don't have a problem there, so what are you solving for? Anyway, let's move on from Uber. So what makes up a brand's relationships with people? We look at this in four main ways. So the ability to pull people towards the brand is really important. So what's kind of magnetic about you? What is it in your personality that excites people and just like makes people want to feel like they're moving towards the brand? Another is its activation in market. So how does the brand actually behave? What is it going out there and doing? You know, what actions is it taking? What marketing is it doing? And what does that mean about how pushed into the brand people feel like they are? The next is how powerful is it at prompting an emotional reaction? I'm not going to mansplain that one to you too much. You get the idea. But the more that you can elicit an emotional reaction, it tends to be the more differentiated your brand is, obviously. And then how powerful its offering is. So what is it actually putting on the table that you can see that you want from it? You know, what is it going to provide you with, and how relevant is that to you? So using these like kind of four lenses, you can look at not only your brand, so it's a great way to look at your brand, but you can also look at your category. You know, how good is your category at pulling people towards it? I was talking to a flower brand the other day, and we had to have quite an honest conversation where I said, your category does not pull people towards it. People are not that interested in flour. It's not a baseline thing that people are like, yeah, give me more flour. You know, it's something that you get when you need to bake a cake or bake bread or something. So that's a really important thing to understand about your category, because you're not working with a huge amount of pull. So you need to understand, what is it about your brand that could start to create that? And is that something that you should be doing for your category as well, rather than just your brand? And also to look at your competition through these lenses as well. You know, it might be that your closest competition is so strong rationally, and they've got like everything working beautifully, the machine is humming, but they don't have much else. You know, they don't excite people, they don't make people feel. And so that would be, you know, a great place for you to take your brand in opposition. So I think this would be the point. It would be good to have a conversation with you guys as well. I know you mentioned lots of brands at the beginning. We're happy to talk here about your own brands as well if you want. You know, how good is your brand at pulling people towards it emotionally? You know, how good is it at stimulating people to kind of care and come towards it? We have some sort of key questions that we tend to ask to assess how powerful your brand is at doing this. So for example, how attractive is your brand? I mean, I think Apple is a great example of that. Although I don't know about anyone else, it's kind of wearing off for me a little bit, the drama of it. Michael, did you have any of these you wanted to talk about?
I know that I saw Patricia on the call. Patricia, would you be brave to come off mute? Because Selfridges for me is one that would be a great example of a brand that would drive people emotionally towards us. How are you, Patricia?
I'm all right, in you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Cool.
When thinking about Selfridges, I mean, it's such an amazing brand. Like, which of these, attraction, understanding people's needs, a sense of aspiration, a sense of innovation, where do you feel that a brand like Selfridges would perform well?
Within those four.
Yeah, within
Attractive, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's around understanding people's wants and needs. Because I think one thing that Selfridges does really well is the idea that everyone is welcome. It's not necessarily, obviously it is a luxury department store, but it's not just for the high net worth kind of profile. I think there is something for everybody, and it's something that the brand is always pushing towards. So I will go with a mix of that and the idea of being, I think the aspiration of the brand is to be also seen as very innovative within the retail environment.
So fascinating that you say that, Patricia, because I completely agree with you. And I also think that Selfridges has something which is so rare to be able to have, which is a sense of real aspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So the Selfridges brand is so desirable. It's so iconic, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that you can't buy that sense of specialness. You've got to work really hard to work out what the special sauce is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that the Selfridges brand is just super desirable, which is quite similar to Nike in this example here. They've worked for years and years to make their brand the most, desirable, exciting sports brand ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest fear of Selfridges as a brand is be seen as just like as a reliable, your everyday shop. It is always aiming towards the kind of surprise element and amazing people. And
yeah, fantastic. Does anyone else kind of work at a brand that you feel does a really great job of pulling people in emotionally? Feel free to come off mute and just shout it out, even if maybe you don't work there, but it's just a brand that you happen to love. They get you.
Hi, this is Ruth Ann. I'm streaming from San Diego, California. And a brand that I really like is Lush. I think it's originally, I want to say maybe it came out of, Canada. I don't know if you guys have it across the pond there, but I love the fact that when you go into the store, the smell actually permeates outside of the store. And then when you walk in, you have these young hipsters that walk you through a, where they will put the different products on you and wash your hands and, well, at least pre-COVID. It's just a cool place to go. And you feel, if you're a little bit older, you kind of feel hip and cool when you walk in there.
That is just such a great one. Thank you. Yeah. How many brands appeal through smell? Like, that is so innovative and exciting. Because really, brands that appeal through smell tend to be food brands, right? Those are the only ones.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that, like, especially within a retail world, like they're playing within the entire consumer journey. So that's something as well to think about when you look at your brand's relationship with people, is it's not just the brand itself, but it's also how a person becomes aware of the brand, the pre-usage experience, the usage experience, what happens after you use it. And then when you finally decide to purchase it again, like Apple, for example, their pre-usage experience, whether it's in the Apple store or even the unboxing experience of when you purchase their product, is extremely attractive. They major on attraction in that moment and make it quite like a surprisingly memorable aspect of their relationship with people.
Exactly.
One thing that I would just add to that is between Apple and Lush, even though they're entirely different, when you go into the store and you see the diversity of people usually in the store from age group and different sectors, you still feel like they all belong to the same club and that you're all part of the same kind of aha moment, and you're cool. You're part of this cool club.
And that's that desirability again, Ruth Ann. I completely agree with you. You know, that's that membership exclusivity, but not in a sort of financial way or mean way, but it's being part of the crew, you know, having people to identify with. That's a really hard thing to build.
Should we try 4 more?
So for myself, one of the brands that I really love recently, especially with this whole COVID thing, is HelloFresh and Good Food. They just speak to families really well, especially, the families who are always on the go, don't have enough time. Their branding is just on point for both HelloFresh and Good Food, and their communication is well done, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example as well. HelloFresh, kind of from an empathy perspective, I'd say they excel really well, where a lot of times cooking can be an inconvenience, or you might, not want to buy certain ingredients that you'd need for cooking a particular meal because you're worried that you might waste quite a bit of it. Often happens with, fresh spices and things like that. And so HelloFresh kind of solved that by like decompartmentalizing a unit in store and breaking that apart and giving you that convenience offering to allow you to cook a really healthy meal that tastes great at home in a simple and easy way.
What I love about that as well is that I don't know if this is happening in the US at all, but in the UK, those food box brands are also, because they're so empathetic already, because they have to understand what it is you want in order to actually give you it. And food is so emotional that there's a lot of space for that to go wrong. So they have to be really in tune with you. But they've also started sending like weekly gifts and samples that are tailored to the people that are getting them in these boxes. So you get things like a new pillow spray or a new face oil or a new, I don't know, spoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so understanding that our worlds at the moment are a microcosm. We are living within 4 walls. And so if you send me a new pillow spray, it actually does interest me, and it takes up quite a lot of my time investigating it. We need change at the moment, and they've spotted that and they're fulfilling that need.
They've also, I know us particularly with HelloFresh, they also offer these printed out recipe cards, which is great too, because if you're really in love with said dish that you made that night, you can actually go back to the grocery store and purchase more of those items to recreate again, if you so choose.
Which is so transparent, right? That's being like, we'll give it to you, but like, if you want it, you get it, go get it yourself. Here's how we did it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Seriously, if we're sticking with the idea of pulling people towards it, like we looked at the emotional side of it, which is kind of what drives me towards a brand irresistibly. Like, now let's look at that same sense of pull, but from a rational angle. We've got 4 other brands. We've talked a bit about Uber and the clarity that brand offers. You know why to use that brand, but let's look at the other 3. Red Bull, for example, their promise of performance. When you drink their product, they metaphorically are famous for what? Giving you wings. You drink it, you get energy.
You can complete that sentence yourself, can't you? Red Bull gives you wings. That's a serious media investment right there.
And you've got brands like IKEA as well, that does a fantastic job of providing, for people's wants and needs in a really relevant way. I don't know about you guys. At Proqua, we use Slack to communicate between each other. And that brand has evolved over time to become quite like a differentiated and unique offering when it comes to kind of collaboration, a collaboration space, which really helps them kind of become differentiated and stand out from the crowd. Can you think of any brands like this that you feel really drawn to, but more from a rational perspective, whether that's because of the brand's role in your life, how well that brand performs, how kind of relevant that brand is to you, or how differentiated it is?
That seems like a hard no.
Yeah, I think this is an odd one. I would say, I don't know whether you're familiar, particularly there's a British brand of eggs called Clarence Court eggs.
Oh my God.
And I'm not sure whether I have been hit with emotional marketing or activation. Their packaging looks pretty standard, but in my mind, I have, whether it's the truth or whether it's in my mind, they taste better, and I like the functionality of having a more golden egg yolk, and I am prepared to pay more for that.
I have been completely hoodwinked in the exact same way. I somehow believe that Clarence Court are the best eggs that you can buy. And you know what? They're not even organic.
No?
They're not. They're just normal eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So why do I like them?
Because they have exceptionally, they feed their chickens turmeric to help keep the keep the yolks really golden.
Exactly. And you know, that's what makes them stand out in the crowd. I mean, similar to the flour example earlier.
Yeah.
Think of a lower interest category than eggs. I mean, I'm sure we could, but it's not one that we all want to talk about a lot. So standing out within eggs is a real feat in itself.
Yeah, that ability to stand out, that differentiated. I mean, there's so many brands nowadays that are using their packaging to really attention grab. Can anyone think of a brand that really they feels quite stand out when it comes to maybe shopping in aisle? Anything that kind of you can't help but notice?
It's been a long time since we shopped in aisles.
I was just thinking the same thing.
I did see a wall of Super Noodle the other day, I have to say, which was very impactful, but I think that was a sheer volume play by them.
Oh, listen, Tony's Chocolonely is doing a great job of disruptive in-store execution.
There we go. That's the one I was gonna feed unless it was brought up.
I mean, that's pure emotion.
Yeah, it's a great example.
There could be someone from Tony's Chocolonely on the call even.
So all 8 of these things that we've talked about kind of pull you towards a brand, both emotionally and rationally. And there's a whole other side of the relationship equation, which is all about how persuasive a brand is. Why don't we spend a bit of time talking about that? So the question here is when thinking about your brand's relationship with people, and specifically how your brand is seen to behave in market, how strong is your brand's kind of relationship emotionally? So we can look at 4 examples here. The first one being Whole Foods market around, does your brand behave in a way that people can relate to? Whole Foods has been basically made, synonymous with kind of clean eating, ethical eating. I remember Ben and Jerry's, for example. Does your brand always do the right thing? Not only is it a powerful Unilever brand and they make really delicious ice cream, but the brand kind of does a lot more than just that. They've got they support issues with like climate change, inequality, fair trade, so on and so forth. So they really kind of major on building their relationship with people around a brand that does the right thing. Equally, Chipotle being quite strong in the US, there was a advertisement that I can't forget, which was Willie Nelson singing a cover of Coldplay's The Scientist as like an animated, it might've been a claymation ad at the time, but showed the production process of where Chipotle's ingredients were sourced from. It was years ago, but I still remember that one today. And every time I see Chipotle, I think about kind of their kind of transparency, I suppose, in their production. And then finally, popularity around a brand. So when other people see people using brands, they tend to feel drawn towards them, and how the behaviors that that brand exhibits might kind of draw people in at an emotional level. So a brand like, Netflix is obviously enormous. They own the letter N, for example. You see N and you think Netflix. When it comes to your brand's activation potential in market, I mean, are there things that you feel that your brand does really well at an emotional level in terms of how it presents itself?
I mean, Netflix is wild because they're actually defining what their category is. Streaming existed before they existed, but they have absolutely become the market leader, and every brand across the whole world is just desperately trying to keep up with them now. It's hard to kind of wrestle that control back from Netflix. We actually work with Prime Video here as well, and just watching the tussle between Prime Video and Netflix and all the other providers globally it's a really tough fight to win ground back.
Georgina, I think Rude Health would fall into this bucket here. What do you think?
Of activation and popularity.
Yeah, even across a lot of these four, kind of transparency, its openness, and its intent.
Yeah, I was thinking definitely along the seduction, and interesting that you kind of said about the transparency and openness, because I think that's a big focus for us this year, because actually I think we could do a better job of communicating some of the purpose behind the brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting when you look at emotion on its own behind a brand's relationship with people, because this side of the equation is all about how the brand presents itself in market. And the other side of the emotional equation is how much it pulls people in, how attractive the brand is, how aspirational the brand is. Does the brand kind of behave empathetic, and is it kind of an innovative brand? This is really very much about how it then presents itself kind of to people, in the wild, if you will. And I think Rude Health is a fantastic example of showcasing a really strong sense of transparency and integrity. We've got 4 more, and I'll show these now, which is sticking in that same area of activation. So how consumers kind of see your brand out there in the open. Let's now think more rationally than emotionally. So looking at a brand like McDonald's, I'm loving it. Consistency, does it behave kind of reliably every single time? You could walk into a McDonald's almost anywhere on the planet and expect kind of a similar experience.
Having said that, Michael, I don't mean to bitch, but I had a Big Mac the other day which had 1 pickle in it, and I just think that's offensive. So I currently think
so maybe a slight dip in their consistency, but at least they still own the letter M, unlike Netflix with N. Whether or not a brand justifies its cost is a way that it can be kind of perceived, its cost quality equation. Is it worth paying for? Is a rational feeling that you can have about a brand. So a brand like Samsung, I would answer definitely yes. And a lot of people might agree. Is your brand easy to use? When you get a hold of it, is it something that's pretty straightforward and doesn't really cause you any trouble? And Amazon, I can see Serge leaning forward. Amazon Prime kind of direct to door, pretty instantly once you've subscribed, is a really great, easy to use thing. And yeah, go for it, Serge. I saw you.
I kind of split down the middle on this Amazon one, because I agree you can order in your sleep and something will arrive, and that's so easy to use. But actually using the Amazon website is like, you need a microscope, like a calming cup of tea. The experience is so overwhelming. So I think they have a really interesting tension about how accessible they really are. How easy are they to use, because their website is a nightmare, but the delivery mechanism is seamless.
And the last one that we've got in the bottom right there is Instagram. And the question there for your brand when it comes to building your brand's relationship is how much do you feel people know about your brand? And that's very different than awareness. You know, it's how familiar are people with you, what your brand stands for, what it's all about. So obviously Instagram's quite like a simple social media platform. But a lot of people kind of, it's of course easy to use, but they know a thing or two about it. They know what its purpose is. They know what it stands for. They know why it exists. We'll open it up one final time to you all. You've been great. Any brands you can think of that present itself in a way that you connect with, you relate to, that you feel really drawn to it on a rational level. Is there a really consistent brand or a brand that you're like, wow, that's so easy to use, just makes it super easy? Maybe one that justifies its cost really well, or you feel that you really know quite a bit about. One for me is TransferWise. I am a super fan. I live in London and I'm originally from Detroit, and I transfer money abroad quite a bit. And it's just so easy. I have it on my phone. In a couple clicks of a button, it's done. And it tells me how fast that money's transferred. I feel confident that it's arrived. And it's just the most accessible thing. I think that I have, from my relationship with a brand like TransferWise. They excel on a lot of other things, but for me, the ease of use is definitely one.
I guess similar to that in terms of category, I feel like I have that relationship with Monzo. So the app is just so straightforward and simple to use. You can, as soon as you've made a purchase on your card or on your Apple Pay, it appears within the app. I can see exactly what I've spent at what time. I've got both kind of like a joint account and my own personal account within the same app, and it just does kind of exactly what it says on the tin, and it's the ease of use is so great. So yeah, that for me, from a kind of like very rational point of view, I think is a great brand.
Yeah, I think with Monzo as well, it's so empathetic, right? It's kind of like what Uber did to taxis is what Monzo is doing to banks. They've observed that you tear your hair out every time you walk into a branch of your bank because they just cause unnecessary fuss and you have to sign this, that, and the other. You can have 2 weeks. Monzo are just like, look, here you go. Here's your app, press your button, it'll happen for you.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding of what like all of the frustrations and joys that consumers actually have with banking. Great one.
So building your own brand's relationship with people, we've talked about 16 different ways that a brand can build its relationship with people. They can be anything from how attractive the brand is to how much integrity people feel that brand possesses, to the clarity of the brand's role in people's lives, all the way through to its ease of use. And those are the things that Saoirse and I are really familiar with at ProQuo. They're the 16 different ways that we've kind of proven that brands relate to people and people relate to brands. And what's funny about kind of the brand to consumer relationship is that it's no different than, as Saoirse said at the start, the relationship that you have with someone else, with a significant other, with a family member. You can understand why you love or leave someone on these 16 different things just as much as you can understand why you love or leave a brand. And because we're all in the world of marketing and interested in brands, and many of us are brand owners on today's call, it's a great framework for understanding how you can really deepen the spaces that you can look to focus to deepen the relationship that you have with your consumers. And it isn't just about your brand and its relationship, but your brand is a triangulation between where your brand fits within a category and how your brand is positioned against its competition. So when you're thinking about how your brand builds its relationship with people, you can look at the 16 drivers, but you can also understand within that universe, what are your competitors doing across those 16 drivers really well? what do people feel they need from your category across those 16 drivers? And therefore, where might your brand find a white space opportunity to really major on one or two of those 16 drivers, really focus on deepening your relationship within those focal drivers to kind of carve out a competitive edge. And we work with a heck of a lot of challenger brands at Proco. There's like 150 brands currently on the platform, and a lot of them are challenging the status quo. So when you look at their 16 driver profile versus a market leader, the market leader's 16 drivers of relationship will be very similar to the category, because when you ask people about their feelings with regards to a category, they tend to reflect how they feel based off of what they know. But when you know that you want to shake something up, when you want to shake things up in the category, a challenger brand can really look at where are the other opportunities, where are the needs within the category currently maybe unmet, and therefore where might I best position myself for growth. Serge, anything that you want to add there?
I mean, I think if you can understand what people are expecting from you, you have to understand that if you want to disrupt it. Having said that, if you want to go the safer route and not kind of disrupt your whole category, you also need to understand what the category looks like and where you absolutely need to succeed. So where you need to kind of outperform what people are expecting. So having that kind of 3 layers of category, competitor, and your brand means that you can see where is their space, where is everyone bunched up, what's important for me to actually deliver on versus what would be very disruptive.
Yeah.
So you need that complete picture.
And we spent a bit of time, we're going to wrap it up here in just a second. We spent a bit of time at the start talking about Uber and how they understood that they really needed to improve their activation potential at an emotional level, specifically with regards to connection, integrity, and transparency. And they were able to diagnose whether or not, a new campaign, free rides for the NHS and a couple other creative ideas, whether or not that hit the mark. And so we wanted to kind of introduce you guys as well to we call this a Valentine's Day value, to take the next step in our relationship. And we've got a product called Creative Lab, which basically allows you to optimize any 3 creative ideas that you'd like in hours. And we'd love to offer everyone who's here today a free Creative Lab optimizer. If you're a current customer on Proco, there's a heck of a lot of you here. So that's completely free as a thank you from us for joining today. And you can use that anytime in February. And if you currently aren't on our platform, feel free just to drop a comment, raise your hand, and that will kind of signal to us that we should get in touch with you, because we'd love to offer you before the end of March a free Creative Lab optimizer too, for when you join Proco during February. So Saoirse and I will be on hand.
Michael, that was quite a few raised hands quite quickly.
Oh, what Creative Lab is, in case it's helpful to learn more, because we didn't talk too much about it today, but it's essentially a part of our brand management platform that allows you to understand whether or not your creative idea, whether that's a campaign that you might be working on, whether that's a new packaging design, or whether that's a concept that you have in the back of your mind that you'd like to understand more about, whether or not that's going to deliver on the strategic objectives that you've set for your brand, and whether or not that idea is going to deepen your brand's relationship with people.
I was just going to say, Michael, you can use it for testing a new proposition, looking at your brand's new social media idea, new product ideas. It really is any marketing activity that you're thinking of doing. You can see whether it strategically moves the brand forward in the right way.
Absolutely. And you'll get a sense from a couple hundred people within hours whether or not your brand is moving in that direction against drivers that you identify that you really want to focus on. You get, as Saoirse presented at the start, the system 1 gut feelings, that 95% of decision making is in that subconscious. So you get that kind of gut feel based off of your idea. And you also get that system 2, more deliberate, articulated thoughts on how your ideas could be improved and optimized to kind of help your brand deepen its relationship with people. So feel free to take advantage of that if you guys would like. We would love to help in any way that we can. And with that, we've got a couple minutes. Saoirse and I are happy to stay here if you guys have any questions, if you want to ask anything to us at all. But we hope to see you again soon. We have events really starting every fortnight. We're going to be, in fact, next week, Thursday, with the global CMO rather, of OkCupid. And she's going to be talking about how OkCupid are kind of crushing the art of relevancy through a strong focus on culture marketing. And that's our next event coming up next Thursday. So definitely be on the lookout. We're happy to we'll send a link around in case anyone would like to join.